I need to understand what you feel like you need from a space, and then I'm going to design with that in mind.
I mean, it is cool that you're like interior design, design psychology, real estate. Like it's all about the home.
You do unpack some stuff with clients that not everyone lived an idyllic childhood. You probably need more psychology background than you do design if you want to go do this well and safely.
I did not know that this was a thing.
Let's talk about your history of space. Talk to me about your earliest memory of being happy or scared or feeling safe.
What did you find to be kind of like maybe a surprise for you as you kind of got into the industry?
Amber, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
So fun to have you on the show. And thank you for taking time out of your day. So you specialize in interior design, also design psychology.
Yep.
We worked together. I remember that there was a training that you put on. You went and presented all this stuff, and I was like, this is such a fascinating thing.
Did you bring your slides today?
No,
I'm just
they're
kidding.
all up here.
Put them up on the TV.
Today we're going to learn. No, just
Gather
kidding.
around, class.
Where did this interest start for you?
Good question. So it probably started with psychology. I went to college to get my bachelor's, associate's. Wasn't sure what I wanted to go into, but always knew I liked psychology. So I decided to get my bachelor's in psychology. While I was there, I wasn't sure how I wanted to do it. If I wanted to go like a traditional therapist route, because you need to go on and get further education if so. So after my bachelor's, I just sort of was aimless, as you are in your early 20s. And I took a little beat and I backpacked through Europe for a month. Yeah, I highly recommend. Not now that I'm much
Sure.
older
Yeah,
much bougier now. I don't think I could backpack. But so then I came back and I was still like, oh, I don't know what I want to do with this. So I went to school for interior design because that was another love. So just sort of trying stuff out. And while I was in school for design, I stumbled onto some articles that sort of like loosely referenced like the connection of psychology and design. And I was like, what? And I was hooked at that point. So, I mean, this was before, I'm going to age myself, but this was way before, not the internet necessarily, but way before.
Not that long ago. Yeah.
But way before Instagram and,
Social
where you
media
could just
stuff,
find
yeah.
anything about anyone. And
Yeah.
so I looked up the authors of some of these articles and emailed them, and they gave me some great advice. They said, this is a pretty like early stages in this field, but we're seeing interest in this. And so they said, you probably want to get higher education in one level or the other, whether that's design or psychology. And at the time, the interior design program, I mean, it wasn't as robust as it is now. I mean, I was hand rendering and like had all the markers and doing all that. There wasn't like anything digital. And so
Sure.
I was as high as I could get probably in design. And so I feel like, well, I love psychology, so I'll go get my master's degree in psychology. And so I went to graduate school for that. And then all my independent studies were basically like geared towards like the space and space psychology and how humans react to space. And so after that, I mean, I was kind of like, I was studying that, but wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. So I ended up doing the traditional therapy route after that and did like clinical like psychotherapy and did like just traditional therapy sessions and trauma work with kids, worked with nonprofits. So I just did that for a while and kind of let the design psychology just sort of be a seed that was planted. And then I decided to go speak to the college, the interior design college, and ask if I could just lecture on this. And was like, there's some cool things that I think your students would find interesting. And they were like, yeah, we love that. And then they called me back and said, actually, do you want to come back and teach a 16-week class on design psychology? And I was like, no.
I thought you were going to say yes on that one.
Hard
Yeah.
pass, no. But I did say yes eventually. And so I've been teaching that class. I've taken a little break because my son, while he's young, but I'm going to go back in the fall. But I taught that for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
did like a big deep dive into that, learned a lot, developed the class, got super excited about it, and did just mostly education with it for many years.
So for us laymen's,
Yeah.
what is design psychology really?
It's basically using psychology as like your guiding principle to do design work. And so rather than going in and saying like, I know what the bones of this, like I know what this space needs. Here's trending colors. Here's, here's what like you're listening to, like obviously the logistics and what the client needs, but you're going a little deeper and talking to them about their history with space. And we have these really formative years, ages like 0 to 5. And those are when we attach to that's our framework for how we attach to other people. So normally you're caregivers. And so that's like your blueprint for how you move through the world. But you also attach to space in those times. And so we kind of pack that up and you make design decisions based on that history of space, whether we're aware of it or not. So design psychologist goes in and kind of like unlocks all of that and works with it. And that's like what guides the design process.
I think like my exposure to design is just like the things my wife tells me not to buy and how to not to decorate, and she's better than me, but we're both terrible at it. And then the occasional exposure to the feng shui, right? That's the only other thing that I'm familiar with, is more so about like space energy and kind of how things like the feeling or the sensations or whatever it is that you get by being in a space.
Those feng shui has some rules that probably wouldn't apply to design psychology about like where to place plants or, do this for prosperity. So there's some like rules about where to face your bed. But design psychology is really like, let's talk about your history of space. Talk to me about your earliest memory of being happy or scared or feeling safe. And then we kind of dump that out, work with it, and see what elements we can bring into a design plan. I write like treatment plans for clients. So it's like writing like in therapy, if you came to me, I would say, okay, here's our presenting problem. And then I would write a treatment plan. It's basically a roadmap for how you're going to address that in therapy. Yeah. You do the same thing with design psychology. So I write like a treatment plan for clients based on what their space needs.
Give me like some examples of what that means. Because I'm thinking like a treatment plan is like, okay, do these things, do the activities. Maybe it includes some medication. Maybe there's like some self-discovery work. Mm-hmm. My first thought on this is just like, well, this can't be like, buy these pillows, add these things, do this color, right?
It can be prescriptive like that, but it's sort of, okay, so let's say if you had like a favorite childhood spot that you went to a lot as a family and it really stood out as like a meaningful place for you. Sure. So maybe it was the beach.
Yeah.
And so you're like, I really felt the most at peace and the most like calm when I was at the beach with my family. And so we would take that and say like, okay, well, what elements do we think are important? We don't want like seashell motif, or we're not going to hang seagulls on your like.
I mean, maybe.
No.
Okay, maybe not then. Okay, got it.
No hang seagulls.
No. But we would say like, okay, well, how can we recreate those elements? So maybe it's a textured wall treatment, like maybe it's plaster that gives the movement of sand. So maybe it's in this earthy color, and maybe things are evocative, right? Like we bring in like iridescent materials for like the shells, or different glasses, or just even the color of the sky that you have at the beach. But it's like subtle nods. It's just not so overt that it feels like a theme park.
Yeah.
So you're taking those things and saying like, because you're still going to resonate with that in the space. And if it feels like, we can capture some of that through design, that's really how you tackle it.
What at what point did you you talked about a little bit of this in your background, but I want to go a little bit further. What was kind of like the switch for you that you thought, I could turn this into a career and have this be my full-time thing, my gig that I focus on?
I mean, I feel like I'm still covering that. It's tough because you are like walking that line of, am I an interior designer? Am I a psychologist? Right. What am I doing? I would say it's really come up most recently as I started building an interior design business, that it kind of comes natural to like layer in the psychology. Not everyone wants that, but some people are like, this is too woo-woo. Just tell me what sofa to buy. I don't need all this deep dive into my childhood. But some people are really into it, and I found that more and more, especially lately, people are reaching out for that. Like they want that experience. They want to uncover, what it is that's going to help them feel like the most at peace or the most safe or whatever, and they're seeking me out for that. So that's been really cool. So I would say like probably just educating people and like speaking about this has brought people to me, and just sort of putting it out there. It's like, if you build it, they will come. Like,
It is cool because I was looking into more of like places or things that you've been featured, and it's like you've been featured on like Utah Architect. You've been on like morning shows, various magazines and stuff, and which I didn't know. Working with you before, it was like I just saw you in that company, and it was like, cool, I know Amber from this. This is what she does. But it was all the other outside stuff that I didn't know that you were seen as an expert in, which is really cool that you've been able to take time and come here and talk with us.
oh, I love that stuff. And it's been, I mean, I think the highlight was in 1 year getting featured in Architectural Digest twice in the New York Times.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like, what? Like, pinch me. So it's been cool. I think if you're excited about something and I say yes to almost everything, putting yourself out there and being like, yeah, I'll give a quote for that, or I'll do this. I feel like, you just do gain some traction, and people do want to chat with you about it. So
Getting into the role and moving into design psychology, I mean, that transitionary period for you when you were going, because you said you were really focused on, you did the therapy bit for a while, and then you got into teaching. What did you find to be kind of like maybe a surprise for you as you kind of got into the industry, or something that you weren't expecting, or something that you thought like you had a misconception about what either their design or the design psychology piece was going to be before you got into it?
With the design psychology, like the psychology end, I felt pretty prepared for. It's just talking and having like good communication skills and being able to draw things out of people and just kind of reflective listening.
Yeah.
The interior design portion, it is so much more about running a business. A lot of times there's a lot of creativity, obviously, when you're doing the work, but it is a lot about managing timelines and schedules and working with subcontractors and holding people to task and navigating changes, and from, whether that's like your subs or the client having changes, or so it is creative, but it is like 20% of the time you're doing your creative work, and the rest you're just like putting out fires and managing people and issues. Yeah.
What as you've been looking back on I'm actually now that I'm thinking about it, I'm really curious about your curriculum that you had developed.
Yeah.
I was going one direction, and then like the thought actually came to me. I was like, no, actually, I'm really curious about the curriculum. So, you said you're not really teaching that now, or?
I offer a mini course. So the class that I teach through the college is 16 weeks. It's like a semester.
Yeah.
And then when I was taking a break to just hang with my kiddo while he's young, I condensed all of that into a little mini course. And I've been offering that for a couple of years. It's like a 60-minute course that I hold via Zoom, and it's live. So there's that, but I'm going back to teaching in the fall, where I'll do the big old like assignments and 16-week course. That's through the community college.
Got it. So tell me a little bit more about like what your curriculum entails.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you cover when like I'm thinking, I'm a person who's considering design, and maybe I'm similar to you, for example. Hypothetically, this is not actually me, but and I'm thinking about, I'm interested in psychology, but I'm also interested in design, or I'm interested in design, but I'm curious about how I can incorporate these pieces to like make my design decisions better, or like more unique, or more catered to my clientele. Just like an understanding of like what are the kind of things that you're covering and that you're talking about as part of this curriculum.
So I would say it starts like micro and then gets like macro. Am I using that term right?
Yeah.
So it starts with like the student as their own client in a way. And so we really like talk about their history with space, like personally, talk about some exercises that they could do with their client if they were into this, about like timelines and special objects and just different things that are like very like subjective to the person. And it is a lot of like psychology based, because you have to have like that foundation of like attachment therapy. And so I kind of like high level that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a little more broad and I move into things like the psychology of color and prints. One of my favorite sections is called our evolutionary psychology. And that is how we sort of have these survival skills that we needed like primitively before like modern day housing.
Sure.
And we don't really rely on those or need them anymore, but we still use them when we're making design decisions. So like we like being under like a protected covering. We like having a protected back when we're in a restaurant, so we don't like having our back to a crowd. There's all like different kinds of things about like the choices that we make. We like dappled lighting, like the like fractured light that comes through the trees. There's just different preferences that we have. And so I talk about that quite a bit, and that's a super fun section. I talk about then commercial space and how like groups of people respond to spaces. And the class kind of ends with them designing their like ideal space based on, so they write a treatment plan for themselves and then use all of those elements to design like what would be their dream space.
And all of that spans 16 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's other stuff in there. There's like
Sure.
designing with the 5 senses, and
Okay.
yeah, there's a ton of stuff.
What's kind of your driver to be in this space and continue to explore this space and really kind of pave the path of interior design and psychology coming together and being able to navigate those for your clients? Like, what continues to drive you to continue doing this?
Well, I'm super passionate about both fields. I love psychology so much. I don't know that I loved it as a full-time, like, long-term, like, doing that day to day. And so I love that I get to have these, like, brief, I mean, not always brief, but, like, interactions with the client where I'm still, like, doing therapy-adjacent things. And then I love design. I love, like, the power of space. And I mean, we all have a reaction to space, whether we are aware of why we're having it or not. I love knowing that. I love the way I walk through the world, just knowing how like important spaces are to our psyche and to our sleep cycles. And so, you know, to our well-being. And so I'm super excited about all that. And, you know, design's fun. So it's hard to, I can't turn that off. Like I came from like a visual merchandising world, so like I can't even walk into like a Starbucks without like arranging their shelves while I'm in line. So like sickness, but
that's funny. Some people will call that OCD.
That's a condition.
They might.
It's a condition.
Yeah. What have been some challenges as you have tried to navigate all of this? Like, what are things that's like, I did not know that this was a thing, or this was. Yeah,
to add to that too, like you mentioned, like it was kind of an up and coming thing at some point too, right?
Now it's everywhere. There's even a new field called neuroaesthetics. And so design psychology is really about like at the specific person that you're working with and their history. So you kind of keep it like close to them. Neuroaesthetics are really more of like the hard science, and that's like brain chemistry, what's happening in your brain as you're viewing something beautiful. Or as you, like they did this thing at the furniture market. I don't know if you're familiar. There's like a big furniture market, and they have it in Vegas and in North Carolina, other places too. But they measured people's like brain waves and their like sight patterns as they entered spaces.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So this is really getting like deep down into like what's actually happening in the brain when we're viewing these things or when we're around these spaces. And so I feel like you guys maybe have noticed this. Therapy and psychology terms have become so mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
That everyone is using them, and some people have commandeered them and used them in like not appropriate ways.
Sure.
Like if you couldn't find a parking spot, that's not trauma. Or So people have taken a lot of like therapy terms and sort of armchair therapy type of behavior and use them in ways that it's like you could do some damage if you're claiming to do this without the foundational background of having some psychology. That's where I feel like you probably need more psychology background than you do design if you want to go do this well and safely, because you do unpack some stuff with clients that not everyone lived an idyllic childhood. Not everyone had like a space that felt supportive and safe to them,
Sure.
but they're seeking to have it now. But you do have to kind of go back and talk about some of that in order to get them, you know, to a space now that feels great for them. And I think you could do harm if you don't understand like some of the foundations of like, well, if someone has PTSD or if someone has, you know, different scenarios that they've been to or just some historical trauma or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then you're just dumping all of that out and being like, great, we're going to solve this with, you know, some throw pillows.
Yeah.
I think you just have to be careful and tread lightly and not teeter too far into like the therapy realm. It needs to, you know, you have to keep it light enough that you're not like deep diving into therapy. And I think to know that you have to understand like the foundations of psychology and therapy.
Before we reached out to you and before Colt mentioned, like, I didn't even know this was like a thing. Like for me, it was like interior design. It was always just about like the, you know, the colors, the look, the whatever, and taking it to that next step. It's really interesting to me is being able to apply. My wife is a social worker.
No
So
way.
so she's been kind of in that safe space. I've seen her, she's been going to school and we've been having those conversations, and her also like deciding how much she wanted to go into therapy, because as you're saying, there's a lot you have to deal with.
Yeah,
a lot you have to
social
unpack.
work is,
Yeah. So thinking about that, as far as like the negative sides, as Colton is saying, what about like the positive sides? Or if you have like maybe like a great experience that you've had while working in this space, tell us about something that you've had a good experience or positive in the design psychology space.
I mean, probably just client reports of saying how much better they feel in their space, or how much more productive they feel, or their kids are now more focused or calm. That's probably the positive. Or just really like being there for someone while they're like talking about their timeline of like space and history, and you know, just kind of holding that for them, and then being like, I'm going to help you like figure this out. Because I like, there's one exercise I do that is, it's kind of like bird's eye view of your space. You draw it, and then it's like, it's kind of space planning, but it's more of like, how is the space being used as far as like boundaries? Like, does one person have more real estate than another? Do you have any private spaces that you have? And for one client, she realized like, wow, in my family, her like childhood family, there was not a lot of boundary setting in terms of like someone could just walk in your room, or someone, you could be in the bathroom and someone would barge in. Like there's like murky boundaries.
Yeah.
And she realized, I'm creating that same thing in my current home with her now family, you know, as an adult. And she was like, and I don't like that. That's not serving me well. And I don't want to keep doing that, but I didn't even realize that I was doing it. And so
interesting.
she was like, okay, well, there needs to be some dedicated spaces. And this is like, not like, you know, the kids can't come into mom and dad's spaces, but there needs to be like different respect levels and, you know, clear boundaries. And so just doing that was really helpful for her to like regain some of that, like, I don't know, autonomy.
It is interesting that as we've talked about this, it almost feels like incorporating a psychology aspect to interior design is just like leveling it up. It's just like you could make an argument that it's just like a different approach, but it's like you're taking into consideration like what's the pretty colors that you like, but it's more of the why, and really getting into like how can we make this space yours and make it feel like yours, rather than just copy some social media influencer because you thought their room was pretty. Yeah.
And I think that's well said. And I think there's a whole like form of therapy that is sort of like, oh gosh, I'm going to forget his name now. He was basically like, I'll think about it. It's like, you have everything you need inside of you to heal your own self. And I think a lot of times designers come into a scenario and they're like, I'm the expert. And so, which is true in a lot of cases. That's why you hire someone. But I think it discounts the client knowing somewhere in them like what they actually need from a space, or sometimes they just default to like, well, my designer said that this is the best and so I should do this, even though they might not like feel like that connected to it. Versus this kind of flips that on its head and says like, okay, I need to understand what you feel like you need from a space, and then I'm going to design with that in mind, versus I'm going to design something and then pitch it to you and you just tell me if it landed or not. This is like, I'm using your own words to figure out what you need out of your space, because you might just not know how to translate that as a
Yeah.
you know, if you're the client, you might say like, I don't know, I feel so unproductive every time I'm in this room, or for whatever reason I avoid this area of my house because it makes me
100%.
feel sad. And I hear that and I think like, oh, I know 10 things I can think that you need to incorporate into that to help that behavior, or to change that behavior, or to lift your mood there. But they might not know that. So I think it's like, well, I'm still using their words and what they need, versus, you know, oh, I know the perfect, you know, layout because I've seen it before. And so it's like more custom.
Yeah, because I think I personally have experienced places where like you've been in a space or you've been in a place and it just like didn't feel right or didn't feel comfortable. But I don't think I would be able to easily
Describe
or define. Like, it's like, well, what about it is uncomfortable? It's like, well, I don't know. It's just like, just doesn't feel right, because it's like, either maybe it feels too small, or like you're saying, maybe it's our productivity. Like some of these things you're talking about, like the productivity, or not feeling like I have personal space, or not feeling like I have enough elbow room, or whatever it is, or maybe there's something related to that. Not even anything I'd ever considered at all.
Yeah,
before
we
now.
could deep dive into that if you want.
Oh no, my wife probably needs it more than I do. No.
Well, a lot of it goes back to your personality type too. I do some work around that. I have in my sessions, I have clients take the Myers-Briggs personality.
Yeah.
Have you taken that? What are you? Do you know what you guys are?
No.
Oh, geez. No, I can't remember. It's been
JMIL. I don't know. Is that the right one? That's a different one.
No, just
Is that the?
I think you maybe named some of the letters. That
is that right? So like that. NIT.
Yeah, like you're either an E or an I, introvert, extrovert, and then you have like N or so you're like sensing, feeling, judging, intuitive.
I'm definitely a extrovert, sensing. Intuitive. Something like that. Okay. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. So I don't remember. Clients do that test because it does tell you a lot about how you like walk through the world.
Sure.
So introvert, extroverts experience space very differently. And it's also more about how you recharge than how you present to the world. So you can be extrovert, but you might actually recharge like solo.
Because it's like my space. Because like we're talking about like my home, right? Like this is like my space.
Yeah. Like people who are J's, their judgment, and they need like predictability and routines and like hard facts, and so they need some structure. Yeah,
I think as you're speaking, I feel like I'm really starting to get a little more insight as to why my wife and I disagree on certain design decisions.
You might, you know what? Find out your type, because I made these packets, these design packets that I sell. I'll give you one. But it's based on your Myers-Briggs type, and so it has and then it has mood boards and it has a breakdown, and so it would be fun to see where you guys land.
Interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Do you do these sorts of design sessions like with the couples as well, like both of the and as like a team, and you have to like manage both of their?
Not. I haven't.
You're talking like husband and wife for a house?
I don't know. Yeah,
I haven't done. It's
you have. Okay.
Individual. That would be
interesting.
Fun,
okay.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought. I'm just wondering, like, having like the competing potentially experiences, right, between the two, and kind of bringing that together.
Probably a whole business out there for just like helping people navigate a remodel or psychologically. You stay together through that.
Yeah. Psychological remodel.
That's how I know. Yeah, my husband and I are meant to be.
That's
We've
right.
done many together.
Hit up Amber if you want to figure that out.
Call me.
That is interesting. So, so my mind's going a couple places. Before you take on a client, do you are there certain clients that you're like, we're not going to jive well together? Like, I know someone else that can try to help you out, to try to figure out, navigate your space or whatever. Yeah. Or is it like, I will take anyone and everyone, there's just some steps so I can really understand what you're trying to accomplish.
You know, it's the same as therapy. Not everyone's a good fit.
Yeah.
And I think a good therapist will give you, 10 to 20 minute free session or a phone call to screen you and see if the vibe is right. I've turned people away as a therapist, like, that's like not my specialty, or I know someone that would be a good fit for you. I think it's the same with design. Not everyone, like mostly the people that seek me out for design psychology, it's a decent fit because they're already interested.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so, but it is like more when I'm doing like true interior design, not everyone is a good fit, whether that's like they have unrealistic expectations or unfortunately like the budget just doesn't fit the asks. It's like, wow, that could never be done on, you can value engineer to a point, but beyond that, it's like, yeah, you probably would be better off doing this on your own if that's your budget versus paying for my time.
Right.
Yeah, I can guide you but I like to customize things. So if someone comes to me and they're like, here's what I need, here's my budget. And sometimes it's like, well, you know what would be better for you is like, I'll make you a design packet that you can go execute versus me project managing and bringing in subs. And
Have you ever had anyone that says, like, I need your help for interior design, and I know you have this psychologist aspect, but I don't want that. I just want you as an interior designer. Has that ever come in your path, or is it pretty well intertwined?
Not yet. And I feel it out. I mean, there's been some like we did a yoga studio through my design business, and it just like made a packet for them, like a design packet. And I weaved in like some like biophilic design, which is like nature-based design for them. And they seemed into that. And if they seem intrigued, I kind of offer it. But I think it just depends on how they come to you. A lot of people are just like, I have this project, I need it done. Especially if it's like a commercial space, I might be like, do you want this information about like how groups of people respond to this? Or do you just want like straight up design? I think it's just so subjective that you have to just ask. I do like to keep the design psychology. Like if I'm going to do it, I like to like make it over, also and be like, let's do a design psychology session. And if you need services beyond that, a lot of people just need a head start. Like a lot of people are like, that's all I needed. I just need, the treatment plan. I need some imagery to get me started. I need the list of things, and then they're on their way.
What are some basic skills that you would recommend for someone if they want to get into this space, but like, let's just start with interior design. Like, what are the things that someone needs to know and understand in order to do well in this type of market?
Just doing design.
Yeah.
I think you need to understand materials. Like if you have people that say like, this needs to be like high performance or, and they have pets or kids, or you're not going to be like, oh, well then we need a white linen.
Yeah.
You need to understand how different things perform. I think understanding like what works well together with textures and colors. I think you can go pretty wrong with color. And then I don't, just some basics of like, some people just want quick updates. And so knowing where your biggest bang for your buck is. I did staging for years. And so I directed like a home staging division of a real estate company. And I think I learned a lot through that about like, listen, I have a day to turn this house into something that's going to look like it's ready to hit the market. And so I think you just learn where to put your effort into. And so stuff you need to know, if you're really going to like deep dive into remodels, you need to understand like structure, and how to work with contractors and what's possible, what seems to be a load-bearing wall, and the cost of things, because you don't want to go in and start promising things that it's going to be a fortune.
Yeah, especially if they can't afford it.
Yeah. It is. I do enjoy one of my wife and I's favorite pastimes is finding model homes and just like wandering through them. It's like, oh, we know that this builder does a really good job. Let's go check out their model home. So I think like
that.
staging itself, like you go in there and it's a very impressive on the difference between an empty house, a not very well put together house or like a really thought out
Oh my gosh.
staged home? Like how that can sell
So
that
true.
place.
My biggest pet peeve, it's like, just don't stage if you're going to do something like halfway there. I don't know if we can swear on this. So,
Yeah, no, go for it.
But like, don't just put a desk and a chair in a room and call it staged. It looks
Yeah.
like an interrogation room. Like, let's not. Like, just leave it to the imagination of
Yeah.
the buyer then. Like, we don't need that.
Better.
Or
It's almost better to be empty than it is to have like the
I
wrong
feel like
things in
because
it.
it almost then like highlights just the smallness of the room when it's like, or when people just do things for the sake of doing them. Like, we don't need a full table setting at the, like a family's gathering right here with a full knife and fork and placemat and the candles that haven't had the plastic removed from them. Like,
Right.
we don't need that like in our life. So just, I think it's like the art. Good stagers, it's like you can't tell if someone lived there or not. It's like, well, is this house occupied? And that was like always the best compliment as a stager when someone wasn't sure.
Anyone who walked my house would know it's occupied.
Same.
But yeah.
Kid stuff everywhere.
No, but that's a good point because walking through homes is called and saying like, if it doesn't look like I have to like essentially resonate with that idea of being like, see myself living here. This is like the way that I want to be able to. Could I have a life here?
Yeah,
That's really the question that that's going through my mind when you're looking for homes and you're buying houses. Is you're walking through and you're saying, okay, what's it going to be like for me to live here? Do I feel comfortable in where things are? And there's a little creativity of being like, oh well, I don't really like that. I can move that around, but having some level of inspiration is definitely different than the big empty room.
Well,
I have to do it all myself.
Data on that actually.
Oh, really?
The client or the homeowner, future homeowner, starts picturing themselves doing things in the home, like, oh, I could have coffee here, or oh, my kids could play here. Then you're like halfway there.
You're more likely to close the deal.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have experience in also real estate too, right?
So I actually got my real estate license. I'm just
That's
collecting
so cool.
options for life, just like maybe that it was an expensive year and just gathering things that maybe I would do someday. So yeah, that last year I got my real estate license. It's on inactive status because I was like, okay, it's a tough field. I don't know if you know any agents, but you either, I know you guys just had someone on.
Yeah,
actually.
we did.
Yeah. You either do it or you don't, and you dive in, because the success rate for agents, it's like, I think it's like 80% fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's harsh out there. And so it's really cool when the good ones, make it, but you really have to jump in and be prepared to have $0 for the first while you're building up your business. So I love real estate. My husband and I, like you guys, go to model homes. We go to open houses on the weekend just to check out what's out there in the world. And we love architecture and design. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that, but I knew I loved it. And so I was like, I'm going to get my license. And then I was like, wait,
that's so cool.
I'm going to actually put that on the shelf for a minute.
I mean, it is cool that you're like interior design psychology, real estate. Like it's all about the home, right? And you're very focused on making sure that you're getting the education and knowledge that you need in order to do the thing that you want to do really well.
Mm-hmm.
And you make sure that as you take on clients, that they see that and that you are a subject matter expert on the thing that you're talking about, and that you're seeing all sides of the story and the approach on what you want to do in order to make your recommendations and make your clients happy. It
does help, yeah. It's like working in all parts of the kitchen. If you want to run a restaurant someday, you got to know how everything comes together,
I'm curious, though, what advice you might have for somebody who's considering getting into this, because, like, to my mind considers interior design to be similar to the real estate industry in that way. That's like, okay, I'm going to be an interior designer. You go to school and you learn whatever it is, you get your education, and then when you get to either a graduation or whatever point, certification or whatever it is you get to, then you're going to be like, okay, now it's like, now I just start my own business and now I have to go just like solicit my things, or is there other pathways that you're aware of, or what would be your recommendation for somebody who says to you, I'm 15, 14, and I'm like, ooh, I want to be an interior designer when I grow up?
I get these questions on my Instagram all the time from people. Interior design, I mean, I think not like Utah, you don't even have to have education. You can just say, like, I'm an interior designer.
Just like that.
As far as I know, yeah, that's how it's always been, but they could have changed that. But other places you have to be accredited. So you do need to go through, you can't just say I'm an interior designer, but you need to go through a program. But I think if you just want to do design, you just need a good eye, and you need to be good with people, good with budgets, creative, like a problem solver, but you have to know the foundation. So you don't have to go to school, but I would say if you're not going to go that path, like find someone you really respect and see if you can mentor under them. Or I feel like a lot of people, like I kind of have the tattoo shop mentality where it's like, I want to be a tattoo artist. Cool. Well, today you're sweeping the floors. Like, and then you work your way up. Yeah. And I appreciate that. I don't know if that's like old school of me, but like I have no problem starting from the very bottom and just learning the ropes. And so I think don't be humble and get in there and be like, well, maybe I can just organize your sample library. And you're going in there and you're helping them curate fabrics or tiles or, just cleaning that up and getting familiar with that stuff. But I think education is never a bad thing either. So you got to learn it one way, either under someone or through school. So that's just like traditional interior design. If you're interested in design psychology, I feel pretty strongly that you need a psychology degree to be able to do that.
Would you recommend any specific, I know we're in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Or would you recommend any specific school over another if someone's wanting to get their psychology degree?
So I think I just look at make sure they go through a lot of the like foundations of psychology, like, and that they're covering a lot of like, there's all kinds of schools of thought. So just make sure they're covering all of that and you're learning like the history of it. So I would just look at the curriculum and make sure it's that like vast. There's different kinds of psychology. If you really do know going into it, I didn't know going into this, I wanted to merge these fields really. Yeah. If you know going into that, your closest bet is probably going to be industrial psychology or an environmental psychology degree. A lot of those, they look at more commercial and like big users of space, like how the people are reacting to those spaces. And so it's not as like deep diving into like the individual, but that is one way that you could do this. And so you're doing a lot of like office design or like probably working with architects on like space design, stuff like that, which could be really cool.
Is a design psychologist role a common role in corporations in general? Is it just not common, but it's starting to become common? Like what does a space and opportunity look like currently for someone? Because I think you asked earlier, but then you mentioned that find a mentor, follow them, check them out, whatever. Yeah. But like, is there a space for this merge of kind of what you're exploring?
I have a little network now of people that are kind of like dabbling in this, and a lot of them are doing kind of a similar thing that I'm doing, which is working with clients or educating the public. One area that I personally would like to get into, so if any architects are listening, I like partner with an architect firm because a lot of times they don't have in-house design teams. Mm-hmm. They're just doing the structure and they're doing like all the bones. Yeah. But there's choices in there that I think could use the eye of a design psychologist or, even an interior designer. A lot of them do bring in that, or the client wants that layered in as far as like design services, but it would be really fun to partner, early on with and just sort of as like a consulting firm, talk to the client and the architect and be like, okay, well, let's think of some of these principles as you're building the space versus once it's built and we're furnishing it.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like the difference between like, having an influence on the skeleton, right? Being able to move the design decisions farther up the chain as opposed to waiting till, it's like, okay, well, this is the space you have. You have to work within this, as opposed to saying, well, let's create the space for the purpose that we're hoping for.
Yeah, or like, well, okay, so knowing that we like dappled lighting and can we be strategic with where we place windows based on where trees are?
Oh, yeah.
Can we, if you know that you sleep cold or that you really value like the warmth of a bedroom, well then let's orient that to the west facing, where you get that warmer hot light. Or if you're an artist, maybe and you need that bright clear light, let's do a room to the east that brings in that like eastern light.
Let's rewind back to younger you. Would you do all this again?
Yeah, for sure.
Or what would you change?
Or
I was actually thinking like,
if you could maybe make some adjustments to how you approached your current career, or
I would tell myself to be more confident, for sure. That like, you don't have to have all the answers to dive in and start trying, because I think I would start building the design psychology business earlier. And I probably, I don't know. I think I just would have started taking clients earlier, like personal clients who were interested in design psychology. I think in the early stages, I turned people away because I was like, oh no, I need to refine this, or I need to like really like make sure that I'm like worth paying money for.
Sure.
And I think like, no, I think back to the teachers I had in college, and some of them were crap. They were just like, they're like, whoa. Like I remember having to call one teacher and be like, are you coming to class today?
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, I'm making breakfast, I'll be there soon. And I was like, I'm paying for this. So we pay for things all the time that like, and I know I care 1,000 times more than certain people care, and they're putting their work out there, or they're not. And I think like, no, I should just do it. And so I probably just would have like pushed myself out of the nest sooner.
Take those first clients,
Spread
put more confidence in yourself, and be like, no, I am worth this money. I am my opinion does have value, and it's worth putting it out there and getting that charge.
Scary. I mean, anything creative, you're like, is this worth it? It's like really hard to price your creativity.
Yeah, creativity. I know, like on the creative space, it's always interesting because it's not as hard tangible, and that much of the value oftentimes comes from like a perceived value from some folks, as far as like how much they're willing to pay. It's like, oh, so, some people look at the interior design and like, oh, well, you just paid this person to pick out our couches for us. It's like, okay, well, no,
let me go behind the scenes.
Yeah, there's more to
show
it.
the hours I was like searching online and not turning off my brain. And it's funny at this industry, it's like people always want to barter and like haggle over a price, but if a plumber comes to fix your pipes, you're not like, ooh, I don't know, can I, you might, I guess, but you don't always. They're just like, here's the bill, and you're like, thanks, let me pay it. But these creative industries are different.
It's true, they are.
I think with that, what does work-life balance look like for someone in your role?
That's the hard part, because you never turn it off. When you are doing creative work, like laying in bed, you get an idea, and so you jot it down, or you are anywhere and you see something cool and think like, oh, that would be great for this project. So you're billing for hours that are estimated up front, but you're doing it all day long regardless. So, and you just have to be okay with that, I think. But for me, I've learned not to be on call for clients. So like, okay, my Monday through Friday is my work hours, but I can't be available for every Black Friday sale that's coming up, every weekend when I'm with my family and you text because you saw something that you were like, what about this? Like, it's fun, and you form connections with your clients and they become your friends. So it's like setting that boundary of like, no, I'm available. Now's family time. But I mean, I'm still dragging after my son goes to bed, and husband and I put on, whatever garbage show we're into at the moment. And we both are on our computers, like doing work. So we're just,
Do you feel like travel heavily influences someone's ability to do your role well, just because they're exposed? Like you said, you went backpacking, right?
Yeah.
And Europe, there's so much history over there. I've only been there once to one country.
Where'd you
go? Prague.
Oh, love Prague.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
But like, do you feel like that would help someone with their approach and just like overall knowledge?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think we're so insular. And there's people that never leave the U.S. and so
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just know.
Or never leave
I
Utah.
guess even, touche.
Or their state,
Even
their
in
home state.
our own country, there's differences. So if you go to the South, there's different architecture styles. And I was in New Orleans, and just that was so cool. Like the history of some of those architecture buildings are really cool. But yeah, I think so. I think you get inspired by. One thing I love about Europe. And Prague's very old, so you might have seen this. Like, they have this, like, reverence for just the history of things that, or even in Rome, for example. So they have, like, the pillars from, like, that they're not serving a purpose now. They're, they one time held something up, but they don't tear them down. Yeah. So the railroad or the tracks, they just make an X through the city. Because they're like, well, this is how we had to do it to preserve these columns that have no function anymore. They're just part of history. And and I think like the old tiles or just like the old paint scraping off a building, I feel like we're quick to be like, oh, that looks old, let's replace it. Or it makes me so sad when I drive downtown and see like the old hand painted signs being like either like painted over or getting like some, bad siding put over it. It's just depressing.
Bad
like,
siding.
why don't we have like some respect for this stuff? This is like, very cool part of history.
Cultivate the history. Yeah, there's a lot of character that we lose when we just like decide to replace it with something new.
It makes me sad.
I think of shows like Fixer Upper, right? Where they just, I think Chip and Joanna did a really good job with that show, and like just tearing back, here's this carpet. It was kind of old, ripped it up. It's like, holy cow, here's this wood that's been there for years and years. This is actually better and kind of fits more of the aesthetic that we want, so let's run with that. And I feel like that was kind of, at least for myself, that was like, okay, it's not always about the new and making sure that everything's, super clean and nice. It can be clean, but it can also be old and have the history and the story behind it too.
I prefer that. There's that whole like wabi-sabi design that's like there's inherent beauty in things that are older or imperfect. And I definitely prefer that as like a personal design style. Like I would rather have an old, beat up vase than some, and a new one in my home or so. I love that with design too. Like even if you buy something new, you should always layer in something vintage or something, that has a story to it.
That's how Bailey is. I always call her when she wants to buy something. Like, man, you're like an old lady.
Good for her.
My wife and I,
we
took the approach that, like, generally speaking, all of the art that we have on our walls is all like commissioned or like made by a person. It's
is
like
it?
specifically, yeah. It's like we have like our photos for our kids, but then we
Yeah.
also have like someone where we paid them to like draw a picture of our family as opposed to whatever. Or we have like a painting that my brother-in-law, his friend, like didn't necessarily do for us, but like kind of did for us. Like those sorts of things where it's
Yeah.
like that's the kind of stuff that we want to have is like all like creative, made by someone kind of art.
Art is one I feel strongly about that should not be store-bought. Like
or generated by AI.
yeah, it should not. Yeah, all of the art in our house is almost all of it I think is vintage or we bought from the artist or
Yeah.
So we have a lot of guys on my wall. I don't know who they are. And they're just cool oil paintings.
Yeah. Is there anything like we haven't really covered yet about the career that you do, that you thought about that you probably would want to share with somebody who is interested in it that we haven't asked or talked about, or somebody who is thinking about going into this sort of space? If there's something that you would be like additional advice or...
It might take a minute. I mean, it takes a minute to build trust and to build a name for yourself. And so just be prepared. It might be like a slow build, but like the more you do it, the more education or just knowledge or, wherever you're getting that from, the more confident you'll feel. So don't be afraid to just... Well, also inspiration can come from anywhere. I know that's so cheesy and, but
Sure.
I feel like look for it and like, it doesn't have to be directly related. You can follow a lot of design accounts, but like there's so many other people that are interesting and doing cool stuff too that you never know what you'd be exposed to. And so just be open to all of it.
Do you have any recommendations on how someone could build their clientele?
Okay.
Because you think of like
Mhm.
real estate agents,
Yeah.
and there's usually a brokerage that they're
Yeah.
able to work through, and there's leads and stuff.
Yeah.
Like
Or your
that, right?
picture on a bus
Or
stop.
Yeah,
bench.
Just
yeah,
that
you
really.
do
Just
that.
get your picture on
Bus
a
stop
moving
bench.
vehicle.
But yeah, you think of other industries, and they kind of have their method.
This is so like tried and true, but I would say like word of mouth is your best. So I mean, it like, okay, we came from the marketing world where
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
the best thing you can do is get other people like evangelizing your brand
Absolutely.
and that's like the strongest form of marketing. So most of the design work that I have done or am doing came from a referral from someone else.
Mhm.
So, I would say don't be afraid to ask for that either. Like ask for a referral or ask for like a testimonial or something because people trust other people that they know, and then just have some work to back it up.
Almost like a portfolio, like have a portfolio
Yeah,
ready.
always have like an online portfolio for sure, a website, or just, even if it's Instagram, if that's all you can do.
Sure.
Just start getting photography of your work so that people can see what you're about. One of my early mentors in therapy, she was also a businesswoman, a great one. She's still in business, running a private practice, but she said you should always have your 3-second like pitch of what you are good at and what you do ready at all times. Like don't come off like confusing or unconfident. Like if someone says, "What do you do?" have not cheesy rehearsed, but like have something that this, I stand for this.
Yeah.
And like someone in a quick read is going to know what I do.
We often want to give our guests the opportunity to also give any plugs, any like projects that you're working on, or anything you want to advertise, or whatever it is.
I would say I'm just going to say what I want more of in my work.
Yeah.
And I would love more short-term rental projects because I think those are so fun when they are not someone's like main home, because I think you can be a lot more adventurous and you can be a lot more playful. Like if I'm going to spend money to stay somewhere, I want it to feel cooler than my own house and more special.
Oh, sure.
And so I would love to get more like Airbnbs or just like a short-term rental, with someone's second home or a vacation home. I think those are super fun to do because you can do cool things with wallpaper or, little niches that like are themed a bit, not on the cheesy side, but
Maybe a little cheesy though.
Okay, maybe a little. I'll do a little cheese. But yeah, so things like that. And then more design psychology clients where people who just really value the process and are willing to like, not do the work, but like in a way, like, unpack a lot of that stuff from their history of space to get something cool.
Got it. And where can people find you?
I do have a website. It's amberdunforddesigns.com. That'll take you to pretty much everything. My Instagram, my LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. And if someone wants to find you on socials and see the fun stuff you're doing, is one social platform better than the other?
So the Amber Dunford Design Psychology, it's a mouthful, but that's my design psychology based Instagram.
If I have anything I want to add, it would be if you get those short-term rental ones, just make sure they put better beds in some of those because it's my
Good
biggest
plug.
complaint.
Yeah.
Please,
Better
Okay.
beds.
please
Right.
put better beds in your
The guys,
Airbnb.
better beds,
Yes.
please.
Please.
We'll talk to someone on Airbnb. We'll get them
Yeah.
on and be like, hey,
Hey.
can you make sure there's better beds?
Yeah, you need to vet this. Maybe that could be your job. You just go around.
That's it. I'm gonna go lay in these beds. Negative review.
Cool. Well, Amber, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
coming
We
on.
do appreciate
fun.
it. Thank you.
You guys are fun.